The topic is the nuances of script writing and direction. Now, what is the meaning of nuance? Nuance means a subtle difference in or shade of meaning, expression, or sound. So, for example, when somebody is crying, there is a very thin line between crying and weeping. And that person could have a nuance in the way he or she is crying. It could be a mixture of anguish and happiness, or anguish and grief. Could be a whole lot of things. So while we want to talk about the nuances of scriptwriting and direction, I think we have to first talk about what is the genesis, where do these nuances begin? So let's start at the beginning. What happens before direction is scriptwriting. And what is the first trigger or the first step for scriptwriting? The first step would be to get an idea. The idea has to first seed in the mind of the writer or the mind of whoever wants that script to be written. What is that idea based on? An idea is based on a person's experience or a person's worldview or a person's political ideology or a person's social experiences or a person's cultural experience or the lack of experience sometimes could become fantasy. So the idea has a certain larger perspective in which it is embedded. So the idea has to first get seeded in the person's mind. And then what happens is, shall we go to slide 2? Slide 2. This is what the idea is, which is what is the basic worldview, philosophy, principle, or value, or political ideology, or something, some larger mindful experience from which the idea gets seeded, right? For example, when I did the film Pudhiya Tripangal, which is about child trafficking, the idea came from a friend of mine who said, you know, we are doing nothing for the future generations. We are taking away their oxygen, we are taking away their water, we are even taking away their childhood. And that's how the idea of child trafficking, because that's at the core of taking away the childhood of the future when you do child trafficking. It's one of the worst sins. That's how that idea came, for example, in that film. From that idea, the script developed, right? Let's go to slide 2. So what happens after you get the idea? The idea slowly develops into a story. The idea develops into a story which has a certain basic movement of the idea. The idea is not static, it's mobile. And what is it that a story does? A story answers only one question. And the question is, what next? What next? What next? What happens next? That is the question that a story answers. For example, Professor Gajalakshmi is sitting on a chair. What next? She's getting up and walking to the door. What next? She's going to the cooler and getting a glass of water. So that is what the story answers. Yeah? Slide 3, or is it slide 4? The next slide. Now, what is it that the story is fleshed out? The story is fleshed out with the plot and the subplot. So what is it that the plot does? The story tells you the what, but the plot tells you the how. So if Gajalakshmi got up and went to the door, how did she do it? Maybe Gajalakshmi had a sprain on her foot. So she picked up her crutch, held on to it, and that's how she walked to the door. So that's the how question. Once she reached the cooler, how did she take the water? Because she has a crutch on one hand, because she has a sprain on her foot. So how did she balance? So that is the how question. And the subplot is what happens within the plot. If Gajalakshmi is standing near the cooler and if she's not able to take water, somebody else comes to her aid. Somebody comes to help her. Who is that somebody? Maybe that somebody has a track. Maybe that somebody has a backstory. So that essentially is the plot and the subplot. So between the story and the plot and the subplot, the idea moves by telling you what happens next, how it happens next, and the subplot of the how it happens next, right? Next slide. From this movement, you start creating sequences of what happened and how it happened. And this is mostly in the Indian parlance, or the Indian way of speaking it. It's called the one-liner, the script. In international terms, it's usually called the log line, And what is the one-liner? This is the scene breakup with both the what and the how question, with main points of the scene being fleshed out. So what all does the scene really tell you? It tells you what happened, how did it happen, where did it happen, who were all there mainly in that scene, and what were the main dialogues that defined the scene. Only the defining dialogues, the punchlines, as some people say, of the scene. So that is how the screenplay gets developed from the story and the plot, right? Next slide. So then from the scene breakup or the one-liner, we go to the detailed script. I actually think that it is only during the process of the detailed script that the visualization actually starts. I think people start imagining and seeing the scenes only after the first one-liner has been written, because that's when you actually know what happened next, right? So when you come to the detailed script, it is the detailing of the one-liner where all of this comes in, the total ambience, such as exact number of people, of the things that happened, of all the dialogues. If somebody said, if somebody said, oh, that is a nuance. For example, if Gajalakshmi reaches the cooler, I don't want this to happen to you, okay? This is just imaginary. And she has a sprain on her foot. May you never have that. And she goes to the cooler. And she kind of slips. And she holds it and she says, that is a nuance. She's not saying because she's in pain, but she's saying because she's irritated that she has to hold, because she wants to be independent. That is a nuance, right? So you have to know the why something is happening. So you have the what, and you have the how, and now you have the why, right? So that is your detailed script. So the why usually gives you the nuances of why something is happening. So when you say it's very different from very different. It creates a very different mood. So that is when, when they say a picture speaks 1,000 words, that's what it means. One small little differentiation in expression tells you something totally different in the narrative. That's very important to know. Can we go to the next slide? And then what we have is the screenplay. This is where the nuances are very well spelled out. Because in the screenplay, you bring out every single dimension of what is happening there. So you have the visualization of the entire script. So you're transforming the script in your head into a movie, into a film, right? So other details such as movements, how did you move? Why did you move like that? When Gajalakshmi was going to the cooler, did she fall once? Did she trip? What was her reaction when she tripped? Did she get irritated? Did she get embarrassed? They are very different emotions. Did she get irritated and embarrassed? So it's very important to think all of these things through. So the movement, the sounds. So when she tripped and fell, was it loud enough for other people to hear, or was it still very soft that nobody heard? If it was loud enough for other people to hear, then other people are going to come into the room. If other people are going to come into the room and see that she has fallen, something should have happened before for that to become important, right? Then the timings. In your screenplay, you are also imagining You're prioritizing your visualization. Something very, very important may happen just for 1 second, but something not very important may actually happen for 1 minute. And that will have a purpose in the script. But the reverse may also be true. For example, Gajalakshmi falling may be very important because it's going to create the next round of events. So falling is just for a second, but people coming from here, there, everywhere into the roof, that may take a minute. But the real trigger for them to come was the falling. So how you're timing your screenplay and why you're timing it like that is extremely important. The third thing that is very, very important are the transitions. You know, transitions actually establish the style of any film. If you look at some films which are, horror films, for example, they tend to use a lot of dissolving. You know, the ghost goes, somebody else comes into the screen. They use a lot of dissolve. Some of the more abstract stories, if you look at some of these Hollywood films, they like to use slide transitions. For example, there is a set of houses, and in front of, and it's just a flat shot of houses. A huge truck crosses those houses. And after the truck has crossed, you see fields. So the scene has changed. So there are different types of transitions that you must think about when you're doing a screenplay. And it depends upon what the mood of the film is, what the theme of the film is, what you're what you're trying to say at that point of time. Are you trying to be sudden? Are you trying to jump? Are you trying to give continuity? All of these things fall under the larger concept of nuance also. The next thing that's very important is the exact nature of the emotion. It's very important to establish that. There are times when you watch a movie and sometimes people are looking like this and you're thinking, why are they having that expression? Are they angry? Are they puzzled? They are not able to communicate properly what it is. So there is a jump and there is a jerk and there is a certain confusion. That should never happen in a screenplay. Because only when the screenplay has the exact nature of every moment and the emotion of every moment, only then can it have the same level of effectivity when you go to shoot. And that continuity and that intent of emotion is extremely important. And of course, the next is the character positions. You know, there are so many things, techniques that you have to think about, even when you write the screenplay, about where will the characters be? Who will be in the forefront? Who will be in the background? I mean, for example, when you take a ghost story, and then there's a real life person and a ghost, who are you going to blur? And who is going to be in focus and why? And that is actually a visual narrative. You're trying to say something so you have to have a certain basic understanding of camera, or at least concept of camera, when you're writing your screenplay. And as I've said, even earlier, sometimes you can visualize even the music, because you sometimes think that maybe two people are static, or three people, or a whole town are static. There is a reason why they are static. Nobody is moving. There could be a reason. But the music is going to determine what that scene is going to communicate. Maybe it's mystery. Maybe it's frozen in time. Maybe it's another, people who have been converted into statues. It's a fantasy film. So the music can sometimes, imagining the music can sometimes help you to determine how the scene will actually look. Yeah. Let's go to the next slide. The next slide. This is a very, very important slide for me as a filmmaker. Every moment, every single moment on screen will reflect three things. The first is intent. What is your intention of having that moment on screen? And one must always remember that every moment on screen had something before and will have something afterwards. Even the last shot of your film has an effect afterwards. That last shot of the film actually determines how the rest of the film is being received and how will people feel, what will they carry with them when they actually leave the cinema hall or leave their home theaters or leave their laptops or wherever they're watching it. So that is important. The aesthetics of what you're doing. For example, if your entire screenplay is based, say, in a slum, okay, it has to have a slum aesthetic. What does a slum look like? But it has to be captured beautifully. The capturing of it, how you frame it, how you block it, what is the texture you give, what lens you use, these things become very important in how aesthetically you capture that slum. If you are going to a really posh house, living room, for example, you have to know what is the aesthetics of what you're capturing. Aesthetics means it's a matter of taste, which is combined with what are you trying to say. So aesthetics is combined with intent, right? I mean, if you go to the house, let's say you're shooting in Buckingham Palace in England, you can't have anything disorderly. If you're going to the big hall, you can't have anything disorderly because it's a palace and it has people who are sitting. So you can't have an aesthetics that goes against what a palace big hall would look like. The third thing is effectiveness. How effectively have you communicated whatever it is that you were trying to communicate at that moment? If Gajalakshmi fell on her way to the cooler, what was I trying to communicate? Let us say I'm trying to communicate that she was embarrassed. It's very important how I shoot her falling. It's very important how I block her expression. If I want to show her embarrassed, she's going to fall, she's going to look around, and then she's going to quickly try to pick herself up and stand. That's what she's going to try to do. If I'm going to show her in despair, desperate, then she's just fallen and she's not even trying to get up. Maybe she's crying for help. That's what she would do. So I think the intent, aesthetics, and effectiveness are very, very, very important, right? Okay, now this is a very, very tricky. The next slide, please. So the writer director collaboration, this is like a marriage. If they don't get along, if they are not on the same wavelength, the film is doomed. It's not going to work. So if a writer is working with a director, or if a director is working with a writer, be honest right from the start. Say, okay, this is going to work for me, or this is not going to work for me. Be honest and go ahead depending on what your instinct tells you or what the result of your discussion tells you. That's very important. The collaboration between a writer and a director can start at any time. For example, if the idea is the director's idea, the director is going to tell the writer how to write and what to write. So the collaboration starts right at the beginning. If it is a writer's idea, then usually, I mean, again, the collaboration can start at any time, but the writer will usually write a first draft of the script and then hand it over to the director. And then the fighting, conflict, agreement, disagreement, all that will begin. If the idea is based on a book, sometimes the director and writer sit together from day one and write together. Sometimes the writer finishes writing and hands it over to the director. Sometimes the director does the first draft and then hands it over to the writer. That can also happen, right? So the writer-director duo collaboration. Now, when you work in films that require animation, or when it requires extraordinary amount of CG or effects or things like that, which is very, very technology based, then the writer and director will start collaborating with other technical departments right at the beginning. I think that's very important because the very writing and visualization of the film is dependent on how much the other technicians can input into the visualization of the script. So that is very important, right? Now, next slide. This is also very important. Who is the writer? And who is the film director? They are the audience, because they are the spectators of their own script as it develops. They are the characters. You know, in my interview with Javed Akhtar Saab, when I asked him, somebody asked him or I asked him about scripting, he said, from the second scene, the characters are telling me what to write. Because I am being driven by the characters. I am not telling them what to do. They are telling me what to write. Okay? And the writer and the director are the inspiration. They are the inspiration for the idea, for the script, for the characters, for the dialogues, and they are also the inspired. They have to be inspired when they are writing. I feel in every scene when you're writing, there should be that moment when you say, wow. There should be one wow moment, you know. And it could be wow because you thought of something which may have a very different purpose on screen. For example, as I said, if you want to show a completely frozen, township, a whole street of frozen people, you thought of it for some reason and it should give you a wow in your head. So I feel every scene should have that one wow moment when you're thinking about the script. Yeah. Next slide. Here are some suggestions which I did follow when I wanted to understand script writing. The first suggestion is read, 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 and read. You should read lots and lots of screenplays. Lots of them are available on the net. There are many websites also with a lot of screenplays, especially the Hollywood Oscar winners, etc., are available on the net. So I would advise every single, not only director and writer, but anybody who wants to be any form of specialist in filmmaking must go and read screenplays. And now, especially because there are so many different formats now, there is the series that go directly on Netflix and Amazon, which is popularly known as web series. Then you have films, and then you have small telefilms, you have short films, you have 5-minute films. So there are all kinds of formats, and there are screenplays available for all these formats, right? Then the second thing is that when you are reading your screenplay, try and read a screenplay of which you can also watch a film. Compare what you're seeing on screen to what you're reading in the screenplay. After that, if you can, go and write your own screenplay for that film. If you feel that something is missing, or if you feel that you would have thought of something differently in the screenplay that is already available for the film that has already been made, try that exercise. It's a very interesting exercise. And you can watch there are lots of screenplays available on the net, and the films too. So try and do that exercise is what I would say. So the next slide, which is pretty much the last slide in a way. So when you go from screenplay to location, I think the main thing is that you have made your film in your head. You have sat with yourself as a director, you have imagined certain things. And these days, we do have the luxury of storyboarding, and that's very important. So I think, especially when you're making a film that is rather elaborate, with locations, with technology, with characters, with the complexity of the story itself, it's good to storyboard. And especially if it's a film that needs a certain kind of choreography, needs a certain kind of stylization, it's very, very good to storyboard. I'm definitely going to be storyboarding my next film, which is a big film. So as far as direction is concerned, and screenplay to direction, I would rather answer questions that comes from people.
So the first question would be, what is actually called a writer's block? Because many writers have that writer's block. Yeah. So can you please elaborate on about writing blocks?
Can you be a little louder, Prakash? I can't hear you very well.
Yes, yes. Can you please elaborate about writer's block and how to overcome it?
Okay. A writer's block is defined as a moment when your characters stop speaking to you. You know, when your characters just stop speaking to you. That is a writer's block. And I think that you should just become the character or put yourself in the situation where the block has occurred, and you should let it go, walk away from the script, go do something else, go play cricket or watch a film or read a book or cook or, you know, go through your Facebook, social media, do something else. But it should be running in your head all the time. And don't rush it, because that character is not talking to you. Give it time. The character will come and talk to you. Yeah. So
Okay.
I think that's what it is basically.
Okay, okay, ma'am. Similarly, I've heard other film directors also say same regarding this. Like you
Yeah.
write a screenplay today, and if you go and come back after a week, you see this is completely different what I've
Correct.
thought. And
Not only do you get the flow, but sometimes you change what you've written also.
yes,
You
yes,
know, a
there are some
script goes through a
incidences.
million drafts, as you know.
Okay. Yeah, there are incidences. Even many directors have reiterated the same what you have mentioned. Like
Yeah.
they have even completely changed what they have written for the past couple of weeks. So they'll be
Yeah.
coming with a newer ones. That was
Yeah.
fantastic, ma'am. And there's another question like, what were the early influences on your writing, and how do you manifest in your work?
Yeah. You know, for me, I think everything comes out of life. For me, the idea is very, very important. And where the idea comes from is very important. And as someone said, you know, if you want to write about another world, you have to change your world, you know.
Okay.
So, and I think a lot of my writing comes from a lot of my listening and reading, basically. Because I think I've come to realize that for a very long time, I visualize words. That's probably why I prefer oral texts, you know, when I like to listen to podcasts and things like that. Although we didn't have that until recently, so we used to read books. But for me, I think my influences have really come out of life and life's experience, and nothing more than that. And when I say life experience, it doesn't have to only be my own. Sometimes it could be somebody else's experience that you are mentally becoming a part of. I mean, today we have seen the migrant laborers walking home. We have seen people losing jobs. We've seen these things, right? How hard is it to feel that pain? And I may or may not make a film on migrant laborers, but that pain of what I have seen will definitely influence something that I do in the future. It may be tangible, it may also not be tangible, it may be intangible. But these are things that you assimilate, that you process, and that becomes part of your worldview, and that becomes part of your experience of what you have seen and heard. And sometimes you've been there, sometimes you've not been there. But you have to know how to feel the pain and the joy of what is going on to somebody else and not just yourself. If it's only about yourself, then you're dead. Then you're finished, basically.
So
See, the whole point of this webinar is that you can make a commercial film, you can make a short film, you can make a web series, you can make a film for your own satisfaction, just to see. But it has to have, you want to make a film that means something. A lot of commercial films are very good. You take somebody like Vijay, okay, who's a top ranking star today. Every film of his has a social issue. He's dealt with water. He's dealt with the marginalized community. He's dealt with sleeper cells in one film, right? So it's not like he's making his films in a vacuum. He wants, and so somewhere along the line, you have to. I think success is easy. Qualitative success is a little more difficult, and that's what people should aim for. I'm just putting it out there on the
yes,
table.
yes,
Yeah,
yes. I agree to that, ma'am. This qualitative success matters a lot,
yeah,
actually, and that creates a great ripples into the society.
right.
Right, ma'am. Right, ma'am. Since you talked about reading and listening to podcast, I just want to have what are the books that influenced you as a writer and director, ma'am?
I don't have any one book. See, the kind of books that I don't read are these these management guru type of books which says 7 great habits to become a great entrepreneur. I don't read books like that, but I read all forms of fiction. I read anything from Sidney Sheldon to Thomas Hardy. I've started learning to read Tamil books a lot more, so that's something that I want to read a lot more Tamil literature, because there's something in it which I'm not finding anywhere else. And I like to read a lot of papers from journals. I used to read this economic and political weekly all the time. So I try to pick up, because there are a lot of in-depth, essays in journals. So I prefer journals to magazines per se, because I like reading essays and theses a lot.
Oh, right.
So, but really, I mean, there's no specific type of reading, but I know what I don't like to read. I don't like to read spin doctor type of thing. I avoid those.
Oh, cool. Right, you underlined about this, your passion of reading journals, thesis, and all that. So I would like you to, include, combine that into the research of a director who is making a script for a film. So how does it help for a director?
See, the general reading helps you to, like Saif Ali Khan told me in my interview with him 3 days ago, reading makes you think. It's really that simple. Reading makes you think, and it's really important to think. But for my future film that I'm not in a position to announce just now, we'll be announcing it in July, there was a lot of international research that I needed to do. And so I did have a research associate called Dr. Maya Ratnam, who finished her PhD in anthropology from Johns Hopkins University. But from the moment we started the research, both of us were aware that we were researching for a film. We were not researching for a thesis or a book or a manuscript, right? So when we went to meet people or families of the characters who are going to be in the film, I would ask them strange questions like, did they have any mannerism? Would they scratch their head? How did they walk? Did they have a particular type of laughter? You want to know all these things. It's all part of especially if it's going to be a kind of a biopic, right? So research for a film does have a certain different set of parameters, which should be a separate session, rather than research for the sake of research. I think, or rather academic research. So I think they're two very different kinds of things. But if you are doing a historical film or a period film, then you also need academic research, because you can't mess it up and do whatever you want, with history. I think that makes no sense. So I think depends on the situation, but in the end, you have to translate, you have to filter from that research and use whatever you can and translate that into visualization. I think that is important.
Okay.
So I would say that's the kind of research we would
so
do.
I can put it like this: like you have to research global and you have to visualize locally.
Yeah.
Okay. Since you've been part of this various dailies and film festivals, like you've been part of IFFI Goa and International Macau Film Festival. So what does those experiences have influenced you in becoming a better person than before, like in terms of direction and writing?
I think when you look at some of the best musicians of olden times, even if you take somebody like Raja sir or Ms. Vishwanathan and all of them, one of the things that used to stimulate them a lot is to do hangouts with other musicians. They used to sit with other musicians and do jam sessions, and they used to just create something, laugh. It creates fertility of the mind when you hang out with people from your own fraternity and you talk about it. So I think that's what film festivals are. There are two aspects to it. One is that you get to see films that you will otherwise never get to see, because there is still not enough international network that takes film festival films to the mainstream cinema halls. And some of those films are just so mind blowing, you know. So you get to see films. For me, that is a huge incentive to go to international festivals. But you also get to meet other filmmakers, other writers, meet them at a cafe, meet them, have a cup of tea with them, talk to them, ask them. You know, it's conversation, like you and I are having now. So it's conversation, and conversation can never go wrong. It can only go right. It can only tell you something. It can never be a waste of time, I think. You know, I'm not talking about any form of conversation, but meaningful conversation. It can never be a waste of time. So I think, and it has a buzz. And of course, you know, at a very practical level, you network. But I think there is a certain way of enriching yourself when you go for an international film festival.
True, true.
Recently, I think the top 7 or 8 international film festivals got together because they can't have the festivals this year, including I think Toronto, Berlin, even Mami Festival, Mumbai, and they had an all-in-one festival on YouTube.
Online, yes, yes.
And I saw some incredible films there, including an Indian film called Nasir, which all of you could see.
Which is already doing the spec on the social media.
That's the only Indian film I saw.
Yes.
But I saw a bunch of films which I was hungry for it every evening, because I was sitting at home and watching these incredible films, which I would have needed to travel to those countries to see otherwise. You know, so I think I think we need more international film festival. More than having more festivals, we need to make it more accessible to future filmmakers, future writers, and expand the club. I think somehow.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool, ma'am. Since we have talked about the film festivals and the films, there are the film festival films and the commercially viable films. So how do you see this difference or the parities? Like this film is only for a festival film, and this is not commercially viable, and this is commercially viable. So how do you see this, ma'am? Like,
you know, I've seen some really, really, really boring commercial films. I've seen some really, really exciting film festival films. So I think the distinction is made by the system, the infrastructure, which is the distributors, the exhibitors, and sometimes even the producers, right? I think they need to be more consultative on what will work and what will not work in the market. Because you just have to choose an engaging film, and then you have to promote it like you would promote any film that you think will work in the market. So what you think will work, that has to change. Because quite frankly, I've seen some really fantastic, I mean, I always say a film like Super Deluxe, for example, right? 10 years ago, nobody would have brought it out. And if Vijay Sethupathi hadn't been in the film, it wouldn't have gone anywhere. I think it could have been promoted even more. And the latest film that I saw called Nasir, I think it'll be a commercial hit. I think exhibitors should pick it up and show it. That's my opinion, you know. And because people want those kind of films. People the audience has become far more intelligent. But we want to treat them like idiots. So I don't think that in terms of what will work in the market, I think the distinction is faulty. There are fault lines. And I'm very glad those films are in the festivals, otherwise we would never get to see them at all, anywhere. But now that we have OTTs, the OTT platforms, I'm hoping that they will pick up those films and make them commercially viable. You know, that's possible now.
yes, ma'am. Since you brought this, I just want to talk about a Tamil film which is not had a good theatrical run at the theater, but had
Be
a
louder, Prakash, I can't hear you.
yeah. There is a Tamil film which had a shorter run at the theater, but had a greater response when it is being posted on OTT.
Which one?
A Tamil film directed by Parthiban.
What is the name of the film?
The recent one.
Sorry?
Ma'am, the film now, Otta Siruppu. from
Parthiban sir's film.
it had a great response on the Amazon, but it has a lesser response from the theaters.
Correct. Yes. See, the thing is, it's had a good response on Amazon, but I don't know what the economics of that, whether he got a good price for it. That's important.
Yes.
If it's had, and if, I mean, there are so many things that need to be sorted out. Like if the OTTs are taking films for a lesser price and it does really well, I hope they'll compensate the producer or the filmmaker later, you know. I mean, there has to be some system at work over there also where everyone has a fair share of success. I don't know if that's happening right now. I mean, it's got huge acclaim after going on Amazon.
Yeah.
And everybody who's seen it has liked it across the world, not just in India, and not just among the Tamil community. There are others who've seen it because I think
it went globally too.
Yeah. So I think how it's working out commercially for everyone, I don't know.
Yeah, ma'am.
That needs to be sorted out.
Yes. You rightly point out the fair sharing of the economy between the creator and the distributor and all that.
Yeah.
So now there is a challenge for the writer to think about that aspects also and writing for a film, because when he writes for a film, he has to think about the OTT platform which is readily available, right?
Sorry?
No, when he writes for a film, so he has to think about the factors of OTT also. Once it's released on OTT, so how will it'll become?
So I don't think you need to think about OTT other than technologically.
Okay.
Because Netflix and Amazon have a certain quality control and resolution control over what they accept. But in terms of content, I don't think so. I mean, if you look at OTTs, they have films that range from 1 hour to three hours, and people are watching those films. And people sometimes watch them in installments. It's longer than 2.5 hours, you know. And sometimes if it's the kind of film that can be broken up into like a serial, they do that also into episodes. So I mean, I don't think that's necessary. I would like to believe that OTT gives you an opportunity for more creative flexibility rather than restriction. And that's what will sustain it at the end of the day. People are not going to watch if you're going to regulate it so much that it kills the content. I think that will not sustain.
Okay.
You know, so I don't think so. I think this is a good moment for content.
Yes.
But I'd like to believe.
Yeah. And there are a few questions on live also, ma'am. So I'll just put it one by one. Sure. There is an anonymous person. He doesn't want to put his name. He has asked, like, every time I sit writing a script, I keep changing few things in it always. Is it
keep changing?
Keep changing it always. Keep changing few things always every day. Is it a good chiseling, or am I ruining the script?
Well, I think one of the two things is happening. Either there is something weak in the idea or the way you're writing it, that you feel like that you're feeling this constant sense of dissatisfaction, or it could be the opposite, where your creative juices are flowing so much that you're improvising it. But I think the most important thing about changing your script or tweaking your script is, are you feeling that wow moment because you've changed it? Were you that dissatisfied with what you had written? Or is what you have written fitting more into the larger narrative of what you're trying to say? I think that is important. What is it doing for you to change it? Are you changing it? What are you changing it for? And once you've changed it, are you happier with what you've written? If that is the case, then there's nothing wrong with the change. You're doing good for your script by changing it. But if you're doing it just because you're fickle-minded, then it will not fit into the narrative of what you're writing. So you have to analyze what you're doing. You have to say, what am I doing this for? Am I doing this because it makes the script look better? My idea is better? What comes next will be easier for me? Whatever it is, you know. So be sure why you're doing it, first of all. You know, once when I was talking to Vetrimaran sir, director Vetrimaran, he finishes his film. After the release, he'll still be editing. He'll play with the edit. He's telling me. He said, keep editing. Nirthave maate nanu. So, because he
Okay.
likes to see different versions of his film, for himself. Because he's got all that material on the editing table and he wants to play with it. So that can happen. But then he does that after he's finished the basic work, right? He's finished his film, he's released it. Then he's trying to see how it might look in another way.
It's like
So,
he's
so I think it's important to understand why you're doing it. I think that's the important. Yeah.
right, ma'am. Right, ma'am. So there's one audience from Mr. Vikash. He has asked like, how can one master writing for different genre?
Writing for a different genre.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, from which genre? Different to what? I don't know. Different. I mean, there are different genres, but I don't think anymore we think in terms of commercial and art film. That's not the binary that we are working with today. I think we have genres are these days called action films, drama films, horror films,
Rom-coms,
um,
comedy.
thriller films, mystery films, crime. This is how genres are getting defined these days. I mean, I think at the end of the day, the genre of your film should not come in the beginning. It should unfold on its own, depending on what film you're writing. For example, when I made Shringaram, I knew it was not going to be one of those typical mainstream commercial films. It's about a Devadasi of the 1920s. I knew there was never going to be a duet song in Switzerland, right? I mean, Devadasi, temple dancer, Tanjai, Tanjavur, it's not going to happen, right? So I knew the kind of pace and genre that was going to be. So it was an artistic film, basically. But it had a solid story, songs. But what are the songs? The songs are Andakalata Sadir. They're not choreographed by Prabhudeva, right? So because of the nature of the film, basically, they're choreographed by Saroj Khan because she knows camera and she has choreographed from the time of Vaijayanti Mala and Kamala Lakshmi. So she understands that dance, basically. So, but for my next film, although it is going to be a period film set in about 100 years ago, it's going to be like a commercial film because of the nature of that story. It's going to be fast. It's going to have a lot of thrill. You're going to be at the edge of your seat. It's going to be like that because that is how the story is. So some people may call it a commercial film for whatever reason. But essentially it's a political drama, political thriller, or something like that. So I don't think you should worry about genre these days. You should just worry about what film you're making, why you're making it. Are you finding it interesting? Because as I said, the writer and the director are the audience, they are the character, they are the inspired, and they have to inspire all of it. So I think don't worry about genre is what I would say. Worry about what your story needs.
Okay. Yeah, ma'am. And since you talked about Shringaram, there's a question here like, what was your motivation to make a film like Shringaram? And did you expect that it will win national awards? So share that experience with us.
Yeah. Okay, my motivation was, I was attending a lot of these conferences on feminism. And then at one point, something must have triggered it. I felt that, Devadasis are such feminists. Number one, I mean, in India, from the 5th or 6th century AD, there have been these women who were not sent to the kitchen to cook, who danced in the temples, who did rituals in the temples, who had a fantastic hold over the zamindars, were not forced to get married. I'm not saying their lives were perfect. I'm not suggesting no woman's life has been perfect in patriarchy. But I'm saying that they had fascinating aspects to them which can inspire feminists today. Is all I'm saying. And where was it all coming from? It was all coming from their art, you know. And when you talk about art, it has to be visual, so it has to be a film. It can't be anything else, basically. So I think that was my motivation to make a film on the Devadasi and say as much as I can in 2 hours of a film and highlights the dance and the music. And the only way she can seek freedom is through her art. That's about all she has. That's her only weapon. Art is her weapon. So that was my motivation. And then we started writing it, and then Indra Soundarajan came on board, and I had the best technicians, Tota Tarani and Rukmini Krishnan doing the costumes, and it was fantastic. I was working with A grade technicians, which was a huge privilege for my first film. Did I expect to win? The film to win. You don't expect in your first film anything. You just want the next shot to be right. But still, when Lalgudi Jayaraman sir said he agreed to do the music. This is the only film that he agreed. He had hundreds of offers which he refused. We used to joke with him after he composed one or two songs. We used to say, Lalgudi sir, Udu Shatte, you have to buy a new shirt. I think you may have to go to Delhi. Unfortunately, he couldn't go to Delhi, although he got the National Award. But even Madhu Ambat, the kind of work that he put in to the cinematography, I think it's one of his finest films as a cameraman. And Saroj Khan, of course, she had only done Bollywood until that time. So when I went to her with these songs, she looked at me and asked me, "Are you crazy? You think I can do this?" I said, "Yes, you can do this." So she also. So I don't think we thought really in terms of winning anything. I was just excited to work with these people and make the film, and it's very hard. First film is really hard. So you just focus on that. Yeah.
Okay, right, ma'am. Right, yeah. Since you talked about this writing, this motivation, inspiration, direction.
Sorry?
No, writing, motivation, inspiration, direction, and all that. There's a question from the audience, Mr. Vikash. Is it good for a director to be the writer of the film too in most of the Indian films? Or is it better for the directors to confine themselves to direction alone, like in most of the Hollywood films? What do you prefer, and what is your advice on that?
It's such a good question. Such a good question. Um, Mr. Vikas, hello. I don't know. I think a director is too close to it. And I think you need somebody who has a little more distance from it. This is my feeling. So I think it's good to have a writer. I think it's good to have a writer. I don't know if there are any directors who don't have any writers at all. I don't know if that exists. It's really hard to do that because dialogue writing is a skill, script writing is a skill, screenplay is a skill, direction is a skill. You know, uh, I don't know if one person can do all of this. I don't know how well it might be, but even if the credits don't go to someone who assists a director, I don't think there's any director who works alone on his or her own on a script. I think they do take help at least, if nothing else. Personally, I depends. Tomorrow I may make a short film where I may want to write it myself. And it may just be a series of shots. Who's going to write it for me? If it's just a series of shots or just a series of montages, who's going to write that for me? So I think it depends. But by and large, I think because, when you're too close to something, it's very difficult for you to be the spectator also when you're doing that. And then you could just get too carried away. So I think you have to take somebody along with you. Usually it's the writer. And after you're done with the writer, it's your first AD, your associate director. And then sometimes it's your cinematographer. I do think cinema is collaborative. I don't think it's an individual's work. So I think 99 out of 100 times my answer would be yes. I think the director should leave it to a writer and then curate it at a later point. But it can happen that they do it themselves, and sometimes it works out well. So yeah, that's my answer.
Yeah, that's great, ma'am. That's great. There are few questions, 2, 3 questions about because there are more students who are watching this webinar. So there are a few basic questions for them, like they have sent. One such question is discussing about the filmmaking methodology do we always need to follow the 3-act structure, or or we can just omit and do another format?
In the sense, follow a certain structure of scripting.
Yeah, the 3-act. He has asked, like, want to follow the 3-act structure, or we can just go beyond that?
No, I think first of all, structures themselves have become very, very diverse now. I mean, it can be linear, it can be non-linear,
Yeah.
it can be have just a beginning and no end. It can have multiple ends. It can have an ambiguous end. The beginning, middle, end graph, I think, was largely based on human psychology. No matter how many times you see the hero or the heroine or the victim pounding into the villain, you feel a sense of satisfaction. It just exists. But sometimes you can just make an existential film, which is very abstract, which may not start anywhere or end anywhere, and which may have no music, or which may have a soundtrack which is completely not on any given note. That also could, then off-tune soundtrack. I mean, there are ways and ways of, because ultimately what is a film? It's an experience. You're creating an experience for an audience. That's what a film is. So I think if you can do that, what experience are you trying to create? Create that experience and follow whatever format that experience needs you to follow. But in order to do that, you have to have a basic knowledge of the basic crafts of filmmaking. In order to, only then can you have a holistic approach to breaking from the norm. Otherwise, you're breaking from the norm without understanding, how am I going to shoot this? How am I going to edit this? Does it not need continuity? Does it need? So those things, the basic crafts have to be in your head when you do that. I think that's important.
Yeah, ma'am. This one student was asked, like, how to bring up the scripts from our thoughts to the paperwork drafts. It's a real tough game to me. In script formatting, how do we actually format the script in the right order? Yes, ask.
Format the script too?
In the right order. The right order.
The right order. I think it's go back to how you formulate a story. What next? What next? What next? I mean, somebody can't die and then re-emerge in scene 2 and re-emerge in scene 10, right? Simple. So what is the next logical step of what's going to happen? Or what is the next illogical step, which is the logic of your film? Something illogical has to happen. What is the logic of that? So that's the question you have to answer in your head, and then take it from there, basically. And sometimes it can be zigzag. It can be not just non-linear, but it can be complete zigzag. That also can happen. So I think that is important. Yeah.
Since, ma'am, you have done few documentaries also, so I want to have this question personally. So how do you write for documentary films?
Sorry?
How do you write for documentary films?
Documentary films. Yes. See, I've done just one documentary, which was on Indian classical dance. And the way I worked was that I worked with two people in the field. I was lucky enough to work with a very senior doyen of Bharatanatyam, Chitra Vishweshwaran. She's one of the divas of Bharatanatyam. And another person called Janaki, who edits the only Indian classical dance and music magazine to me, Janaki. The magazine is called Shruti. So I sat with them. I wrote it with them. So they actually evolved the script for me. Because when you look at classical dance, it's about 5,000 years. So I was trying to put 5,000 years in 52 minutes. So what you do is you first just put down everything that you want to put down. And then you cull from it. You start editing your script. And you cull from it and see what you really want in there and what you don't want. See, there's one thing about documentaries that we must realize. Anything stops being realistic once you put the camera there. If I want to interview you, Prakash, I put a today we are talking through a camera, right? We're not being 100% ourselves. We're not.
Yes.
Right? We are somewhere behaving in a way that we are aware that the camera is in front of us.
Yeah, we are
So I
bounded,
think
bounded.
to that extent, unless you're shooting nature, the lion has no idea you're there unless it comes to play with your camera. So sometimes even animals are aware of your camera. You know, sometimes
Yes,
even
yes.
they are aware because they're so used to tourists. So what I'm saying is that, so you start scripting, put down whatever you want to put down about your subject, and then you sift from that. You take the most important. If you still have space for more of the script, take the less important. So you start culling out from that. I think that's your censorship starts with the scripting, actually, because you have an idea of how many hours your documentary is going to last, whether it's 10 hours or whether it's 1 hour. You have a sense of that. So I think that's how you do it. And obviously, you're studying your subject a great deal.
Yes.
You're going out there and studying. And usually, when you're doing documentaries about people, you tell that person, forget the cameras here.
Mm.
You have to make them forget. I think that's so important. I guess that's the way to do it. But
Okay.
even documentary is storytelling. I mean, my film on classical dance was not so sudden such a thing happened in this year. Then this came. Then these are the movements of dance. I told the story of dance in that film. Essentially, it's about storytelling. So you have to tell the story of something or someone. That's the way to do it, I think. Yeah.
Brilliant, ma'am. That's there. Like you underline the camera angles also when you do a documentary. You said don't make the person look into the camera. Like you have underlined the camera angles also when you make a documentary film. That's brilliant.
Absolutely.
That's brilliant.
Usually, documentaries need more cameras, I think, because you're not framing and blocking your shots. So, to get a range, it's always good to do a 2 or 3
Yes,
camera operation
multi-cams.
if you
Yes.
have the budget for it. Yeah.
Right, right, right. Yes, ma'am. You talked about there are a few questions like about the why not more female directors and why the patriarchy is happening since you underlined that. There's a question from Mahalakshmi. It says, while Farah Khan has directed Shah Rukh Khan, and why not this is happening in Tamil Nadu? Though
Hmm.
Surarai Potru is in process, not many women directors are scripting for mass heroes. It's good they do parallel cinema. What's your take on it, ma'am?
My take is, please go ahead and get me dates from Surya and Vijay and then Ajit, and I have a script for all of them, no problem. Yeah. No, but I think I must say this one thing, that the top stars in Tamil are not as adventurous as the top stars in Malayalam or in Hindi or in Bengali or in most other languages. They work in a certain way, which is quite small, and they have a very closed world. But I wouldn't worry about that so much. If and when the time comes, it will happen. But I think there are a lot of women directors, you know. I mean, I think there's Nandini and Madhumita, and I mean, Saundarya is a director, Rajnikant, and so is Aishwarya. And there are quite a few women directors. But I think it's very important for women directors to work alongside the male directors, shoulder to shoulder, which is what I admire about Farah Khan. When she made her films, she worked shoulder to shoulder with the male directors. She made her commercial films, but there is a womanly touch to it. There's a soft touch to all her films, but they were as fun as any other commercial film. You know, that's what I liked about her work. You'll see a lot more of that from me, okay? I
Okay.
guarantee you that. Yeah.
So soon we'll be seeing you directing superhero or a multi-starrer, and
Sorry?
no, soon we'll be seeing you
Yeah,
in a multi-starrer movie or a top stars performing for you. But
yeah,
during your answer, you draw a line, ma'am. Like actually, writing for stars and writing for actors or rather artists. So you
yeah,
said stars are not ready to take up these challenging or the adventure.
yeah, yeah.
So about the artist and whom you get inspired, or can you name some of them? Like out
An
of
artist who inspires me?
yes, yes. Now out of my interest, I'm just asking you.
Okay. No, I don't have artists who inspire me. I have performances that inspire me. I mean, even if you take someone like Surya, and he did that, what is the name of that film where he acted as a hunchback?
24.
I've forgotten the name of the film where he acts as a hunchback.
Peradagan. Peradagan.
Peradagan.
Peraragan, is it? Yeah.
Okay.
What a fantastic performance that was. It's a brilliant performance. I mean, so I get inspired by performances. I'm not, to me, no one should be a star. Everyone should be an actor, to be quite honest. And I think the audiences are responding to that also. And I think to that extent, Vijay Sethupathi has maintained himself as an actor. There are the new age stars who have come into the horizon are driving themselves as actors. I have no doubt about that. I find that very inspiring. I do admire Vijay Sethupathi. Yes, I think he's a bit of a favorite right now.
Okay.
I thought his performance in Super Deluxe and Vikram Veda. I mean, he's even in the film that he acted with Rajni sir. It wasn't Kala, right? It was the next film.
Peta.
Sorry?
Peta.
That's right. That's right. I mean, his presence was very powerful in the film. So I do, yeah. He's a guy I'd like to work with sometime.
Oh.
For sure. Yeah.
Congrats, man. Congrats. We would like to see a film with him soon.
I hope it happens. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, ma'am. I think we have a last question from Dr. Padmaja. Like, this question is like something personal to you. Like, madam, what motivated you to choose this profession when there are so many professions all around?
I think what should motivate anyone is what every profession is a medium. If you're an entrepreneur, then money is your medium. Profit making is your medium towards creating something. If you're a writer, the pen is your medium, the paper is your medium. Now the computer screen is your medium. Yeah. So I'm visualizing a lot of things. So film is my medium. Film, essentially film, and cinema is my medium. I like storytelling, you know. So, and I also think that I believe that I have ideas which I don't believe anyone else is going to make into films. So I want to do them. If I see 100 other people doing the same thing, then I may just go and do something else. But I don't see that happening. The ideas that I have are really only mine. So I would like to see them to be able to make them for the screen, is how I feel about it. There's a certain way in which I want to do it, certain way in which I think the audiences will receive it positively, certain way in which I think I can communicate it through films. And so therefore, I don't, nobody should be pushed into any profession, I mean, if you take even someone like Dr. Kamala Hassan, he's a politician, he's doing politics because it's motivating him, whether you like it or not, whether you agree with it or not. He's done films because, well, I guess that's where he grew up, in cinema. So I think he wrote that song, which I think was recently shot with a bunch of artists. So you should use the medium in which your idea is flowing. That's what I think. So if your idea is flowing in film, do film. But whichever medium you're using, you have to learn the craft. Every medium has a craft. If you write a poem, you should know the syntax. If you should understand verse. If you're writing prose, you should know where the comma and the full stop comes. So you must learn the craft. The craft is the process for that. So I think I'm going to be making films for a long time now. Maybe not 10 films a year, but for a longer time, I think. Yeah.
Right, ma'am. Actually,
Okay.
your answer sums up to a famous quote by a theoretician. Martin McLuhan says, "The medium is the message."
Absolutely.
So with that note, we'll just coming to the end of the wonderful conversation session with you, ma'am. I just now invite our honorable principal, sir, who is here listening to you, and I'm just inviting him to speak a few words about it.
Yeah, thank you, Prakash. Thank you so much, ma'am. After having listening to you for more than an hour, I just come to conclusion you are a great visualizer. Of course, that Indian film has traveled a long journey. It has got a tremendous transformation from those days to today. And I would like to know what will be the future. Can you visualize what will be Indian future film from your angle, madam?
Sorry?
What will be the future of Indian film as you visualize from now?
I think the future is going to be the most interesting because everybody is now saying content is king. So I think we will move from success to qualitative success
Yes.
and from failure to qualitative failure. Sometimes failure is important. Sometimes that also can be an important. The philosopher said, a failure, a mediocre success, a success that's just mediocre is actually a failure. But a failure of excellence is a success. So I think we are moving towards better content, better quality, and a lot more innovation. With all your blessings.
Thank you. With so optimistic answer. Thank you. Thank you, madam.
Thank you.
Thank you for being with us.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much and have a great evening.